Hi. Hey, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tonight, we're going to be going over some federal laws and a few other property concepts I think that are really going to make sense to you, particularly sometime when you are sitting in front of a computer trying to get a good solid 70% C minus on a multiple choice test. So appreciate you joining us tonight. And if you're catching this on the recorded line, that's great too. We appreciate you being here, and we're going to make this worthwhile for your time. Okay, so I've got a series of questions we're going to be going through, and you'll have a chance to participate if you like, but if you don't, just sit back and relax and try to tune in on these concepts because they're all very important. They're concepts that you're going to see again sometime when you're when they take your phone away and you're sitting there trying to get that good solid C minus. Okay, all right, so let's go. Let's start with our first question, please. Dan, tonight, of course, Mr. Dan Naylor is our technical advisor, and he's going to pop in once in a while if he's so inclined. He is the owner and operator of our school, which we're very proud of. So let's start with this very first question. The Superfund Amendments and the Reauthorization Act of 1986, SARA, reviewed the funding of CERCLA and imposed stronger standards. Which of the following elements did it not, or which of the following did it implement? What did it implement? Okay, so here's a good reason why you need to read the stem of the question twice. Okay, I read it twice before I even look at the answers. So when you're taking the test for real, you would read this twice, because the first time I read it, I said did not, but then I reread, oh, no. Which one did it implement? Okay, and so we have four potential answers. Innocent landowner immunity, due care and due diligence on their behalf. Strict liability, joint and several liability. C, implementation of the Superfund, and D, retroactive liability. Now, CERCLA is a law that cleans up polluted sites. It can establish who is liable, and sometimes you could be an innocent party, but you could still be held liable, and sometimes you can't. They have a lot of rules. These are what the lawyers argue over, but usually they're looking for larger sites. We've had several of these sites in Utah, and a lot of you know where they are. We had a huge site down in Utah County where we had a steel company for a number of years, and we had another one up here in Salt Lake County. We've had them in Park City for mining sites where they've dumped a lot of heavy metals and places and whatnot. So this is a relevant law to a lot of the things that we're doing in Utah for real estate. But you don't have to dig into it that much, but you should be aware of it, because when you find out you're selling one of these sites, you have to take extra care and extra precautions. And when you have people that are buying commercial sites of any kind, you might want to do different phases of environmental studies. Okay, so in this one, of these four answers, the correct answer here, I'm just going to give it to you, is A. This provided for the fact that you could be an innocent landlord and you could get immunity. If you did not know this was a tainted site when you bought it, and you used due care and you used due diligence and whatnot, then you could be found innocent. Because one of the things that CERCLA does is it goes back retroactive in ownership in order to find out who did the polluting, and it makes them come and clean it up. So a lot of large companies have been clipped by this act. In fact, one of them took the government to court, and the Supreme Court decided that, well, even though this act wasn't in effect when you polluted the site, you still need to comply with it. You're still bound by this legislation that wasn't even in existence when you were operating that site. So it's really kind of an interesting thing. But for the test, this is about as deep as you need to go. Okay, you could have innocent landlord immunity. Let's go to number 2, please. An environmental assessment that includes a review of the records of the property to determine contamination risks to the new buyer is called. Well, it's going to be phase 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you're just looking into the records, then it's going to be a phase 1 environmental assessment. And what they do is they look into the ownership of that property and some of the contiguous properties around it. And what they might find is they might find that, well, your lot was used as some sort of a retail business, and then that building was torn down. It's a vacant lot right now, but right next to it was an old gas station. Well, there's potential then, and that's just the phase 1 study. In order to see if there really is maybe some leakage from old tanks or whatever that may have polluted that area, you would have to get into phase 2 or 3. And some of these, as you go down the list, you have more and more people involved. You could get into a core drilling where they're actually doing a core sample to determine if there is tainted soil and whatnot. But if you're just looking at the public record, and there's engineers primarily who specialize in this, then it's a phase 1 environmental assessment. You know, there's no reason why you guys, if you want to, can't do a little commercial real estate. But obviously, with laws like number 1 and 2 here we've just discussed, there's some additional steps you have to go through, particularly if you're going to be the listing agent and put it on the market. But even if you're working with a buyer, you want to make sure they're protected. So sometimes, you know, if it's a commercial activity and it's not that intensive, maybe you're just doing leasing. You know, leasing is a very good way to, as an entry point into commercial real estate, because there's only so many kinds of leases. Usually the tenant will have lawyers and whatnot to protect them, and you're walking a tenant around trying to find a building. And of course, there's the building owners and the developers and whatnot, and they have their lawyers, and so there's usually lawyers involved. You know, the landlord will say, "This is my standard lease that my lawyers prepared for our building," and there is no state approved lease, guys. I mean, you know, they can have anything in it, so you're gonna have to be familiar with that, but it's not that tough. And then, of course, your buyer will have his lawyer and they'll say, "Well, here's my standard lease," particularly if they're a large company. You know, "We like your lease. Let's come up with the new standard." And the lawyers will get together and work all that out. Really, it's mainly just making an introduction. You know, but don't get in over your head. You know, make sure you get some help and make sure you know what you're doing. But there's no reason why you can't do all kinds of real estate. I've always done commercial real estate in addition to residential, and it's a lot of fun. 3, fraggable means. Of course, I've been to lots of classes that taught me how to do it too. So, as you phase into it, it can actually get kind of complex. What does fraggable mean? I'm on question number 3, please. Okay. And it means, is it the tendency to break down and release particle fibers in the air that can be dangerous if inhaled? That sounds pretty good. Is it zinc oxide that heats up when it's wet? Or is it new asbestos resistance to heat? Or is it another word for mercury poisoning? Well, fraggable, fragmenting.
Friable.
Oh, friable, sorry. Friable, which is kind of like fragmenting, which is why I was, is obviously the tendency to what, guys? Break down and release particles. Friable. Thanks, Dan. Appreciated that correction. Okay. Just goes to show you can make a lot of money in this business, even if you mispronounce things. Let's go to number 4, please. Okay, lead. Lead is a real problem, and usually we have to do lead disclosures, and we have to do amendments to our contracts and whatnot if the property is older than or built before what period of time? You guys know? Anybody want to jump in and say? Well, it's not the 80s. It's not the 60s. It's 1978. Right, Dan? Right. Okay, so lead can be found in many products. The danger is that they used to be put into paint. It made real durable paint. So the problem with this is they can be paint chips, and it's particularly toxic to children. Sometimes they find little paint chips if the paint's chipping off the wall and they think it looks like a Skittle or something or a piece of candy, so they want to eat it. And if it's accidentally eaten, it can be a real problem. Can it be absorbed through the skin? Somewhat, but it's not as bad as if you eat it. Can it be inhaled? Not really. Is it toxic to plants' life? I really don't know. But I do know that it's the answer to number 4 is A. Lead can be found in many products, but we're talking about lead-based paint type problems and issues. And of course, the way we take care of that is if the older, it's probably going to have been repainted, and you paint over the top of it, and you make sure that there's no chipping paint and that sort of thing. Now, another problem that we can run into in number 5 is radon. And radon is a naturally occurring odorless gas. And it's not a side effect of lead-based paint. It's the decay of radioactive materials, okay? But it is odorless, and it comes from burning gas in furnaces? No, it comes from the decay of radioactive materials. Is it a fungus that grows in moist environments? No, that can be like black mold and things like that. You know, there's a lot of things you need to be worried about, but this particular one, radon, is the decay of radioactive materials. I started in the bit, that's answer B is the correct answer. I started in the business in Grand Junction, Colorado. Grand Junction was a boom town during the uranium boom. All of southern Utah and southern Colorado, at western southern Colorado, you know, there were people out looking for uranium and doing claims and selling it to the government. The government would buy all you could get, you know, as they were building their nuclear arsenal and whatnot. And so, you know, Grand Junction, Colorado, where I started the business, kind of glows at night. We couldn't sell a home in Mesa County, Colorado, where Grand Junction was then, without getting some sort of a radon survey. And they had done this so many times that they knew which houses were. The problem was that contractors didn't know that this beautiful sand that was over at the uranium enrichment site that they had near Grand Junction, they would go and they'd take their trucks and they would load up this beautiful, clear, nice sand, and they'd use it for fill around their foundations. They didn't realize that it just intensified the odorless gas called radon. And so we had to have a radon survey done on every home we sold in western Colorado. And I didn't live downtown in that area. I lived up on the, you know, the Red Cliffs bench area where we didn't have that problem. But there is a, you know, of course it didn't hurt anybody, right? Even though Grand Junction had the highest leukemia rate of any city in Colorado, but of course it was not a problem. But that's radon. And it is it a problem here in Utah? Yes, it is. Anytime you have open dirt in a basement, you know, I recently sold a house. Oh gosh, what's it been now? Not recently, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And he actually had not one, but 2 bomb shelters, and they were connected with this thing. And, you know, he had a piece of concrete cut out of his basement where he could get down into these bomb shelters. And, well, that just meant there was exposed dirt in that basement. And so when we did a radon test, it tested positive for radon, or at least to a degree that someone would be concerned about it. How they fix that, or how they do the remediation for that, is that they put in a fan downstairs and it kind of sucks all that gas up and then it blows it straight out through the roof. And that's you know, it's about a $1,500 gig or something. It's not that expensive, but it's something you need to be concerned about. Now, if you had radon and your house was tested positive for radon, would that have to be disclosed on a seller disclosure statement? And the answer is, oh yes, of course. Well, what about if it was that black mold thing and they had mold problems and that was corrected? Would you have to disclose that as well? Sure, absolutely. In fact, there's only one type of contamination you do not have to disclose, and that's methamphetamine. If the house was a meth house and it was discovered that it had methamphetamine problems with the house that was greater than what the county held as their standard, which in Salt Lake is greater than 0.01%, then it has to be fixed, guys. It needs to be fixed. And they fix it primarily by repainting and recarpeting, and a lot of it is cleaning all the air ducts, and then being retested, and then being below that level. Then if it's been fixed and it's lower than that level, then that's the one thing you don't have to disclose on your seller disclosures. Will a buyer find out when he moves in a neighborhood? Well, I don't know, probably, because all the neighbors will run over and say, oh, wow, we're so glad someone bought that place. Yeah, it's been for sale for a long time. You know, it was a meth house. The buyer's going to be real upset. Well, you should have told me that. I should have been in, what am I, and if it's been fixed, it's been fixed. I think when I was running larger brokerage firms that, went up in Layton, I had about 105, 120 agents at any one time. We did 5 methamphetamine houses, but we made sure they were cleaned up. We made sure that, we kept copies of all those records that they had been cleaned up in our brokerage records, but we didn't have to disclose that. Okay. Okay, now if that's a problem for you, give me a call offline. We'll talk about things you can do to kind of minimize that impact of a buyer freaking out on you and calling and saying, I should have been told, when in fact there's no requirement in our state to tell. And, I can see it both ways. I mean, I think any amount of meth is not a good thing, but I think but on the other hand, if we didn't have some standard that a house could pass through and then not have to tell anyone, we'd have many meth houses that could never be sold. What are we going to do? Tear them all down? Probably not. Okay, let's go to number 6, please. Who should a buyer hire to discover if there's any health hazards in a home that they may want to buy? Well, is a lender going to come out and look at this? No. Well, how about the guy that changes the oil in your car? Do you think he can come out and do some sort of a survey for you? Probably not. What about one of our elected county commissioners? You think they have the time to go out and do all this kind of work to make sure you're going to be healthy in that house? No. Obviously, guys, of these choices, it's got to be an inspector. And some of these tests are very minimal as far as impact to a house. You don't have to drill holes in the wall or anything like that. Many of these are just a little box that you set up in the house and let it, like the radon test or meth test, they just kind of absorb different, and then you send them into a lab and you get your readings back. And that, they're inexpensive and they're easy to do. And it's something that you might want to even maybe try it on your own house to just see how that works. But you're going to get all these tests and things, little boxes that you need and whatnot from a property inspector. They're the ones that are probably going to do all this work for you. That is one really great reason on why you might want a little bit of time in order for your buyers to do their due diligence investigation, because some of these things, you can't just do it on one pass through the home. You put the little box in, you do the test, you send it into the lab. That whole thing might take about 5 days in order to get that results back. Or if they're particularly busy, it might take a whole week. So if you're doing your inspections, get them done early on during your due diligence period and make sure you have a reasonable amount of time in order to get all that taken care of. These are some of the practical aspects we talked about in the 12-hour new agent class. And Dan has a fantastic 12-hour new agent class that you guys ought to really take a look at. Sometimes I get to teach part of that too. And it's really a good class because we deal not so much in test-oriented concepts, we deal in practical concepts that you need in order to survive and to thrive in this business. The market changes, the market goes up, the market goes down. But one thing is it's always a realtor's market. I don't care if it's a buyer's market or a seller market, it's a realtor's market. But how you attack that market, how you make it your own, how you build a career out of that changes. And you have to change when the market changes. You have to change some of the things that you might be doing. Let's look at number 7, please. Obviously, it was an inspector. All right, number 7. A mineral that can be toxic that is found in water, paint, soil is which of the following? Is it asbestos? Is it PCBs? Is it radon or is it lead? Well, it's a mineral. These other things aren't minerals. It's got to be lead. Lead is a mineral that can cause these types of problems and needs to be tested for. Fair enough? Fair enough. Okay. Let's go to number 8, please. Okay, select the below listed federal law that was passed to identify polluted sites, fund cleanup, and apply liability. Hey, we covered this one, right out of the chute here. However, which one do you think it is? Is it CERCLA, SARA, EPA, or TSCA? TSCA. It is a CERCLA. Okay. Those are about the only two questions you're going to see on CERCLA. What is it? And what are some of the aspects of it? What does it do? Okay. Number 9. We mentioned this a little earlier. Encapsulation is the concept of enclosing a hazardous material in a sealed environment. Which minerals are commonly encapsulated to protect the occupants from the existence of exposure risk? And what are we looking at? And the answer, of course, is lead-based paint or lead paint and asbestos. Sugar house, where some of the homes are a little older and they have these furnaces, many of them which were actually retrofitted from coal furnaces to natural gas furnaces, which in my opinion, I just rip them all out, put in something, high efficiency natural gas furnace. I mean, why retrofit something that was never intended to do that? But the point is, a lot of those ducts were wrapped with asbestos tape. And that's where you see the asbestos primarily. I sold a home, talking about commercial real estate, I sold a residential property to a land developer, the biggest land developer in the Harriman area that was doing everything. I knew they wanted this house. They tried to get it several times, and the sellers just wouldn't sell. Well, the sellers got in trouble. I had it listed and it ended up being a short sell. And I, of course, contacted that developer knowing that he had to be interested in it. It was right in the middle of his development. And he had to get a teardown permit. Now, a teardown permit is a permit where they have an engineer come out and they look for some of these hazardous substances. Now they can't look for radon. You'd have to have the little box test for that, or carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, PCs, dioxin, and mercury. Those things all have different types of tests for it. And, I mentioned Park City. There's some sites of developments in Park City where they cap the soil. We have some of those actually in Midvale too, where they cap the soil. Underneath that soil, if you dig down far enough, you're going to find some of these types of problems in that soil. But getting back to the teardown permit, he had to have an engineer come out, and they found, yes, there is some asbestos, and yes, there is some lead-based paint in this home. They have radar units and different things that they use for testing this. And so he had to have, when they tore that house down, because obviously they didn't need the house, they needed it for their park that they were putting in, or other things for that area. They had to take it to a special site. I don't know if they had to haul it out to, towards Windover, where they have the site out there, or where they had to take it to another site, but it had to be handled just right. Okay. So, lots of things to know. How do you know and learn all this stuff? Well, you can actually learn while you're doing it. You just have to dig into it. There's a lot of, you could talk to your broker. They have a lot of experience with this probably. If they don't, you can talk to other senior agents in the business. You can call me, you can call Dan. We can give you some directions where to go. Just because you graduated from the school doesn't mean we don't love you anymore. We want you to come back and take our CE credit classes as well. So we're happy to keep that relationship going. But you can also call the legal hotline as well. We have a legal hotline at the Utah Association of Realtors, manned by attorneys. They've seen, heard, and been involved with all these problems probably many times over, and they can give you some guidance on what to do as well. Okay, so there are lots of safety nets in this business. Okay, you don't need to know everything in order to do anything. And if you're one of these over preparers that I can't do anything until I have all this knowledge, how are you going to get the knowledge unless you learn by doing? Just don't get in trouble. Okay, and stay out of trouble by reaching out to these resources and getting informed opinions on what you need to do. Okay, fair enough. There's a lot of people that'll help you, folks. A lot of people that'll help you. People help me, people help Dan. When we first started getting into business, we're happy to return that favor. Number 10, please. Property defects need not be disclosed if the seller tells the broker, hey, don't tell anybody, okay? Now, does that even sound honest to you? Probably not. The property is sold as is. Well, if you read our contract carefully, all properties are sold pretty much as is, okay? There's no warranties that extend beyond the closing. Property was built before 1978. Well, things were built before 1978 specifically have to have that lead-based disclosure. All known defects must be disclosed. Oh, that's the only one of these that is warm and fuzzy. Every one of these other ones is a lie. So obviously D is your right answer. Okay. If there is a defect in the home, if you discover a defect, if you list a house and they're preparing it for sale, and then you go back in the home and take photos and whatnot, after they got it cleaned up a little bit, they've moved some boxes in the basement. There's a huge crack in the foundation, which you couldn't see before because when you looked at the house and you listed it, you now know about that crack. Now, what are the ramifications of that crack? I don't know. I'm not a structural engineer, but you might need to get someone involved that would have an opinion on that. And at the very least, you've got to disclose it. You can't just stucco over it or put the boxes back there so they're not seen, especially now that you know about it. Okay. And you live in a house for lots and lots of years, you might forget some of those things. Now, the serious things you're probably going to remember, but that's one of the reasons why we have a property disclosure form. It's not a state approved form. It's a URAR form. I mean, it's our Utah Association of Realtors form, but it's a form that they fill out, and it touches on a lot of these things, and it maybe even remind them, oh, we did have a problem with the roof. Remember, honey, when that tree fell on it and we had to have that patch fixed and we had to put in some new bracing in the roof, whatever they had to do. Do we have to disclose things where there was a problem, but we fixed it? Yes, you do. You do. Okay. It's the honest thing to do. Okay, and we're required to do it by law. So let's look at in rules and regs. Let's look at number 11, please. All known defects. Nancy has applied to buy a house with a mortgage that is located in a flood zone. Which of the following is true? Now, you may think, how in the world could this be in a flood zone? It's up in the eastern bench, like where I live, and we're in the foothills of the mountain. How could that possibly be a flood zone? You from our house, you can look down, see the whole valley down there, and it's a lower elevation because they're looking not just for standing water or water that could be flooded in. I mean, I remember when we had the big floods back in, when was that, Dan? In the early 80s or mid 80s, and we were kayaking down State Street.
83, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that kind of water that would pool up in the downtown and lower elevation areas, but it's the runoff streams that come from the hills as well. So how in the world are you going to know? Well, they're going to know because there's flood maps, and they're going to look at those flood maps. Okay. And if you might say you have to have flood insurance. Well, okay, that's fine. How expensive is it? Well, it depends. You have to get quotes. But it's not going to be $39.95. It's going to be more than that. Okay. And they're going to require that for the life of the loan. Okay. So as long as you have that loan on there, they want the flood insurance. Why? Because they don't want their collateral floating down the river or floating down the hill or being damaged in one way or another. Now, there's another thing that you need to be aware of, and that is that your normal homeowner's insurance policy doesn't cover earthquakes. If you want earthquake protection, it's an additional separate policy that you have to buy. The one we buy for our house is about $800 and change a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And every year, we sit down and look at it. My wife says, why are we paying this anyway? Because there's so much equity in this house, honey, that, I mean, we don't owe anything on it. So what the thing is that do you want to be self-insured? The big one's coming. We've had more frequency of shakes and stuff in Salt Lake, more than I can remember at any other time I've been here since the early 80s. So, this whole valley is kind of like we used to be a lake bottom. And so what happens is if you have tremors that last for a significant strength and a significant time period, the soil will liquefy, and then your foundation will kind of just like sink into it, and you're going to have major damage on your house. Well, we live up by the fault line. We should have less problems up here. Yeah, but unless it really goes hard, and then so it could be a problem. So, we pay the money. Why? Well, we haven't ever used it. Well, that's the idea behind insurance, honey. We're not hoping something horrible will happen, but if it does, I don't want to be self-insured. I want someone to write me a nice big fat check or to fix the house. Okay, so Nancy applied. Her lender said, oh, great, but you're located in a flood zone, so you're going to have to pay more for insurance. They're going to have to go back to their people, get quoted, make sure that they can do that, which is a good reason on why you need to get a bid on homeowners insurance early on in the transaction. Once this puppy goes under contract, it was really hard to get it under contract in this market that we've been living and existing in with multiple offers. It's hard to get a house under contract. Once you get it under contract, you want to move full steam ahead and getting everything prepared for that closing. So we make sure that your buyer is covered and that they know what this thing is going to cost them. Okay. So on number 11, we have several answers. We have her federally regulated lender will require her to buy flood insurance. Yeah, if you're in a flood zone. Only FHA lender requires flood insurance. That's not true. VA and conventionals also require it. Flood insurance is only available directly from the federal government. No, there's private companies that do it. And flood insurance can be purchased in any coverage amount. Okay. So of this, what are we looking at here? Well, the correct answer in number 11, guys, is, drum roll, number A. A is the correct answer. Her federally regulated lender will require her to buy flood insurance. So that's something you might want to know. Now, it's something that the sellers should know, but I don't know, maybe they paid cash, never had a lender. Maybe nobody ever looked. I don't know. Maybe they looked and they've lived in the house 35 years, 40 years, whatever, a little atypical of Utah, but still they may have lived there long enough they forgot, and or it might be a situation where the current owners inherited the house. They never knew. God, mom and dad never told us we're in a flood zone. Now we inherited the home, and so you don't know it. But to protect your buyers now, if you're representing a buyer, you want to make sure that you look into that. Number 12, please. A protected species with a habitat located on land can limit the use of the land, increase the land's market value. Yeah, if you like tortoises and whatnot, make the land a prime candidate for development, automatically deeds to the federal government. Well, nothing automatically deeds to the federal government. There's steps that have to be taken. We actually have a Bill of Rights, and if you can actually own real estate in our country, and it's yours. Now, it can be taken away from you if you don't pay your taxes. It can be taken away from you if you have a lender and you don't pay your lender and foreclosure looms. There's other things that could happen as well. It can be confiscated if you have a meth lab. I mean, there's a lot of problems of things that, can be taken, but not without due process. There's no automatic deeding to anybody, okay? Everyone has to go through your process to make sure your rights are protected. The correct answer to number 12 is A. It limits the use of the land, because if it's a problem that this is a habitat for protected species, it may severely limit the use of the land. You may not be able to build on it, okay, unless you can prove otherwise. Number 13, gosh, lots of problems that could crop up in your transaction. People say, oh, I don't need a real estate agent. What do I need a real estate agent for? I found my own buyer. Well, finding a buyer is great, but getting them to a closing and making sure you're not sued later for all the proceeds you got out of that house is another whole couple of issues separate from that. There's just too many things that can go wrong. I love out-of-town sellers because they, especially from California, the number one state that people live in that own property in Utah but don't live here is California. And then it's kind of neck and neck between Arizona and Idaho. And there's a sprinkling in Nevada as well. Some of our neighboring states, but the Californians understand lawsuits. And so they're willing to buy, inspections. They're willing to do tests on a home to make sure people know what they're getting. They're also willing to to buy home warranties for buyers, because I just, when you explain it to them, this is nothing more than, lawsuit protection. For about $1,000, we can get all this paid, and they're probably not going to sue you if something goes wrong and they get a whole new furnace and it costs them a $60 copay, instead of the, $3,500 or $2,500 to put the new furnace in. Okay, number 14, please. Oh, wait a minute. We missed one, didn't we? Yeah. Inform those looking at the house. Oh, number 13. Oh, we did protect the species. Okay. When listing a home, a sales agent discovers a serious crack in the basement. Crack is hidden behind some storage boxes, kind of like what I said earlier. The sales agent should exercise his fiduciary duty to the seller and not tell. Your fiduciary duty to a seller does not include lying about the condition of a home. This was discovered. Okay. What should you do? Tell a listing broker. Inform those looking at the house. You should inform your buyers that there could be a potential problem. And if you are the listing agent, you need to tell the other agents. You might even want to detail this somehow and put it in the agent remarks in your listing and whatnot. Well, your seller may say, well, could this possibly hinder our ability to sell a home or to get the money we want out of this home? Perhaps, but you got to play the hand with the cards you've been dealt. And if there's a crack, we can't hide it. We have to let people know. And cracks are not structural. They could very well be structural and therefore not a material fact. No. Okay. All right. We did number 13. That was C. Number 14. Okay. We're having so much fun here. Come on, guys. You're going to be well prepared to take this test. If you watch these reviews, if you work our practice exams, if you're stumped on something and you reach out for help and you get it, you're welcome to call me. I mean, Dan, throw up my phone number. This is my secret cell phone number, guys. You're going to get it. Oh, we don't want to call and bother you. Look, if I'm going to be bothered, I won't answer the phone. Okay, to leave a message, I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. But more often than not, I answer my own phone, and you'll spend a quality 3 minutes on the phone with me, hopefully, and we'll get your answers answered and your questions answered, and you'll feel good about life again. Of course, you can't call me during the exam, although I could probably be the most help to you then. But that would be cheating. We don't do that. Number 14, after the seller accepts an offer on a property, the listing broker discovers damage in the ceiling caused by a leaky roof. Oh my gosh. Now what do we got to do? What do you think, guys? What should the broker do? Immediately inform the buyer's agent. Assume the buyer will discover the damage during his due diligence. Inform only their client. Okay. Okay, or advise the client to accept a payment for the repair. Well, you got to tell everybody. Now, this is under contract now, right? They accepted an offer on the property. That gives the buyer some rights to this home. It's called equitable title. So it's already under contract. You need to inform the buyer's agent. You can't call the buyers directly. They're not your clients. They're being represented by another agent. And usually, okay, if they are your clients, then fine, go ahead and call them. I mean, if you're a limited agent, fine. Someone in your office, well, that makes it very easy to get a hold of the other agent. But the buyer needs to know. You can't depend on them discovering these things on their own, because they will discover them, but it might be only after they close, and then they feel like they've been misled, and then feelings are hurt, and lawyers are called, and it leads to a lot more problems than you want to deal with. Okay. Okay, number 15, please. After giving the buyer and seller the required information about the property condition disclosures, the licensees may still be subject to legal action for A, failing to detect customer misrepresentations. Okay. I'm not a home inspector. I'm a licensed real estate broker. Okay. I don't do inspections, which brings up an issue. What if your buyers are out of town and they say, well, would you go and meet the inspector and then tell us what your opinion is of what they find out? Okay, I'm your broker, and you call me and say, you know, my buyers can't make it back here for the inspection. You know, and they want me to go and take a look and tell them whether they should continue with the deal or use their contractual rights and cancel the contract. Well, it's kind of a conflict of interest there. Let me see. The house is great. You should go ahead and buy it. I get a commission. The house has tons of problems, and you may not want to buy this one, even though this was the fourth house we made offers on. We finally got one under contract. They need to make these decisions. I will not do go and meet an inspector. I mean, come on, guys. Look at these phones we have nowadays. I mean, can we get them on a Zoom call like we're on right now, or a FaceTime call, or some other so there it can walk through with the inspector? It can say, now here's the problem I'm talking about, and you kind of see this right here. This is typical of a lot of homes like this. You know, it could be an issue somewhere down the road, but I'm telling you, if you're buying a house in this neighborhood of this vintage, this is very common. You know, you see this all the time. Okay. But it could be an issue down the road, you know, and they can decide, they can see what's going on. Hey, man, you got to love technology. But anyway, failure to detect the customers or misrepresentations. No. Failure to disclose known adverse facts. Well, it's a difference. There's a difference between finding it or detecting it and knowing about it. If you know about it, you have to reveal it. Okay, relying on publicly available market information, advising the purchaser to exercise due diligence. Okay, of these four, the correct answer is failure to disclose known adverse facts. All right, one of your fiduciaries is you're using reasonable care. Another one, you know, that you have to obey lawful instructions. But as you go down those lists of fiduciaries, you know, which you should be familiar with, you're going to find one called notice. And notice is whatever you know, they know, and when you know it. Okay. So, you know, things aren't going to get any better by sitting on it, you know, trying to hatch it for 3 or 4 days. Well, the appraisal came back low, and I've been trying to work on it to get it up, and I find I'm calling you after 5 days. Well, you know, the moment you found out that appraisal came in low, you should get on the phone and say, hey guys, we got an issue. The appraisal came in low. You know, do you want to go ahead and make the sale? Do I want to go back and work with the appraiser, try to get them to come up a little bit? You know, I mean, there's all kinds of solutions, but they know, and they know what you're going to do to try to remedy the problem, or they need to know that maybe they should exercise their right to get out of the deal. I don't know. That they're going to have to make those decisions. Okay, that concludes our questions that we had for tonight. You know, I really want to compliment Dan Naylor for running what I consider to be the best school in the whole state of Utah. Okay, because Dan keeps his questions updated, he keeps his material updated, and he goes the extra mile to not just get you ready for the exam, but also to throw in a few practical things along the way so that you can get a start and get going. And we care about you at the school. We want to continue the relationship with you at the Institute of Real Estate Education. We want you to refer us, you know, for other people that you know that might want to get into business. Hey, you know, we have a number of husbands or wives that come through the course, and then later their spouse joins them in the business and gets a license. They become a dynamic duo. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, you run the numbers on real estate and real estate commissions and what the opportunity is there for you. And I don't know of a better opportunity in the Valley. I mean, there's all kinds of jobs here and there, you know, $20, $25, $27, $29 an hour, or whatever, you know, depending on what your skills are and what you want to do. But real estate gives you freedom and the opportunity to not just have a job, but to create a legacy for your family, you know, through real estate, and then investing in real estate on your own. You know, I mean, if you work hard, you can literally change your life. You know, it's happened that way for me. It's happened that way for Dan and for Dan's father, who started this school. It is a fantastic thing to get into. Is it easy? Well, we have easy days and we have hard days. But I will tell you this, there's not one of you out there that cannot do this. I don't care what your challenges are or what they have been in life or what you're currently going through now. It's if you have a fire in your belly and you want to make this work, there are many of us in this industry that will back you up and make that happen for you. But you're going to have to make it happen. It's you get up in the morning and you have to go to work. Okay. And and you will develop that self-discipline, but blessing lives and making money, there's not a better opportunity anywhere, because you can really help people through your real estate license. Thank you so much for being here, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity. And golly, we'll see you out there. Okay.
Thanks, Rick. See you there, everybody.
Bye-bye.